Hello, Bravo bosses. This is the Bravo Investigator Podcast. I'm your host, Dana, and today we are talking about Love is Blind, Season 10, Episodes 1 to 6. Let's get into it. Happy Wednesday, everyone. I hope everyone's had a good week so far. And I hope you caught my Monday Reality Roundup episode because that is the only episode we've had so far this week. Because, as I mentioned earlier in the week, there was no new 90 Day Fiance on Sunday, right? I guess the Super Bowl was more important. So we didn't have that. But that being said, you guys, there is an all new season of 90 Day Fiance, The Single Life, and it is already so good. I've already been like just absolutely shocked by it. But that's not what we're talking about today. Today we're talking 90 Day Fiance, and I'm just going to get to it because it is already 8:30 at night Eastern Standard Time. I am recording this so late because I needed a lot of time to be able to gather information about these couples and to be able to watch this as many times as I was capable. I had screwed up when this originally was coming out. Don't even ask, you guys. I don't even know what the hell is wrong with me. I know that originally I told you that today you would get this episode, which is season 10 of Love is Blind, episodes 1 to 6, and that you would also get a Patreon episode today, which would be my friend Connection Queen's kind of behind the scenes of her episode with Lala Kent on her podcast, Untraditionally Lala. Now, two things didn't happen. One, Connection Queen's episode with Lala did not come out yet this week, so I don't have a new Patreon episode for you today, but I will give you one on Saturday. Either it'll be the one I mentioned because I'm still waiting for Lala to get her stuff together and get the episode out. If she doesn't, then I will give you something different on Patreon on Saturday. What I think I'll give you for Patreon on Saturday then instead will be my meet and greet with Carl Radke because I'm doing this meet and greet with him on Friday. It's a book signing at Indigo at the Well in Toronto. So I've gathered some fan questions and some, fan comments and things that people want to tell him. So we'll just see how the experience goes. It could be really fun. And then I might have a fun Patreon episode to sort of like recap that event with you guys on Saturday. So today we're doing Love is Blind episodes 1 to 6. And yeah, I thought this was actually coming out yesterday. I don't know what's wrong with me. I guess I thought because it was season 10, it was coming out on the 10th. So I thought I was going to be able to watch it twice yesterday and record it today. But that didn't happen because it came out today. So I've only been able to watch it once and then a couple of episodes, a couple of times. Plus, I was recording with Jason on Up and Adam Live. So Jason is Adam's husband and he also records with him as well. So I had that. And I had therapy today as well because I am trying to prep myself for my new job, which starts next Tuesday. And as I mentioned to you guys on the Monday episode, that means I don't know exactly what the podcast is going to look like going forward. You will still have 2 to 3 episodes on the main feed and one on the Patreon. I'm just trying to figure out which and what and just, I just want to get settled in my new job and just see how things are sort of feeling and functioning before I start kind of scheduling more stuff during the day. But we have this today, Thursday, which is tomorrow. I'm also going to be out for the majority of the day, so the episode will be out late, but it'll be Southern Charm and Summer House. And then Friday, I will be recording with the In3 podcast, which is a really big entertainment podcast here in Canada, with Callie from that podcast. And we're going to be talking about Real Housewives of Beverly Hills and the Bali Persian style. And then next week, Monday Reality Roundup, I will be recording with Raya from Coffee Meets Vodka podcast. So that should be really fun. And then Tuesday, you will have my episode covering America's Next Top Model, the Netflix documentary that comes out on Monday, but I will get you guys the episode on Tuesday. And then I start work on Tuesday, so we'll see what happens from there. But like I said, we're here to talk Love is Blind, and I keep interrupting my own self, but let's get to it, obviously. That being said, I just want to let you guys know this episode is on YouTube. I still have makeup on from earlier, so yes, you can watch this episode today on my YouTube channel. It is linked in the show notes. You can also follow me as per usual on Threads, Instagram, TikTok, at The Bravo Investigator. I also have a Facebook group you can join, and the Patreon, as always, always, is patreon.com/the Bravo Investigator Podcast. Okay, let's get into it. Love is Blind, season 10, episodes 1 to 6. I didn't love it. I'm going to be honest with you guys. I didn't love it. This is one of my favorite shows. And not because I think that this works, because obviously it doesn't, right? Love is not blind. The question has answered itself after 10 seasons. But this show is just fun. It's messy. It's weird. The concept got us through a period of time during COVID where we didn't know what to do with ourselves, right? And it sort of was an extension of COVID because the concept of Love is Blind was sort of like COVID, right? Falling in love through a wall. So many people did during that time. So here we are, season 10, Ohio. Now, I did not research how long ago this actually filmed. We all know it's usually like a long time ago. Last time it was like a year and 9 months, I think, or at least a year and a half, which just made interviewing after the fact so obsolete and so moot because it had been such a long time, to the point where people are literally getting pregnant with other people and spitting out whole ass babies, right? So here we are with a whole new season. I don't know how long ago it filmed, but I don't know what it was about it. Like, these people were very normal. There was nothing wrong with them. It's actually was kind of nice to see some normal characters. We've seen some weirdos for the past couple of seasons. We've seen people like the Minnesota season where it was just like very white bread, right? And then we saw some seasons where the men just weren't very mature emotionally yet. This just felt like, a lot of normal average people. And I kind of appreciated that not everyone was like conventionally attractive, because I felt like when we went into this show in season 1, that's sort of what it was about. Because not what it was about, it's obviously about Love is Blind. But to me, in season 1, it felt like, okay, whoever you pick is going to end up being hot anyway, so it doesn't really matter. Then they've had their smattering of people who maybe were like less conventionally attractive. And this season, I'm like, there's a lot more normies, right? And I kind of liked and appreciated that. Not that there necessarily wasn't specifically in the past, because I'm sure that they cast a lot of people who never actually get the airtime, right? We hear about that all the time. I feel like so many seasons where so many more people end up getting engaged than they're actually able to afford to be able to show us. So that being said, there could be a lot more. But this season, I was really interested in this character, Emma, who has basically these birthmarks all over her body. And she was actually adopted from China and had to have 10 surgeries over her lifetime or over her childhood to remove these birthmarks because they could have melanoma. So, the whole concept for her of love being blind really makes a difference because she looks a little bit different. So I liked that, and I liked that storyline. But other than her, I just don't know what it was. I couldn't really get invested in the characters. Again, I'm trying to give it a chance, right? Like, I really love this show. I wonder if it's because I didn't watch it the way I normally would. Normally, I would watch it once through just for fun, then once to take notes, then maybe even listen to a couple of podcasts and get a couple of other sort of thoughts or theories. This time, I just sort of did it differently. And like I said, I love the show. I want to give it the best chance possible. But something about it just made me so not invested, to the point where, like, if I stopped right here and stopped watching, I wouldn't care. I don't really care what happens to any of these people. Now, of course, we see that throughout certain seasons where we don't feel we get as invested in certain characters. Like Ali and Anton last year, we were like, okay, they fell in love and got engaged and all of that within episode 1. We didn't really feel like we got to know them. And we have a couple like that this episode. But I feel like even regardless, there was just something about this group of people where either I don't feel like I got to know them well enough, or I don't care, or I'm not invested. That's just sort of what it is for me, I guess. We'll just get into the couples, I guess, but we'll start with Emma, the one I just mentioned earlier, because she ends up with one guy. I'll tell you, spoiler alert, she gets engaged, but she goes through a trajectory with 3 different guys. We'll sort of talk about her experience with the other guys. Oh, and one of the other things I want to mention about the episodes at all is that, we got episodes 1 to 6, and we were still halfway through episode 5 when we are still in the pods. And in my opinion, 5 episodes in the pods is too many episodes in the pods, okay? I know that we as an audience, we are fickle. We are a picky people, okay? I will say that for a fact. But Netflix knows that is too many, right? Like, I think that 2 is too short. Six is definitely too many, but five is also too many, right? So I don't feel like we're being fickle to say that like three or four would be reasonable, but five was way too much. Because when I initially start taking notes, I'm like, I don't know if I should bother taking notes on a lot of these people because I don't know if they're making it to Mexico. And you're only really gonna like care about some of the people that don't make it to the honeymoon because maybe they caused a lot of drama in the pods and so they're really relevant. But I don't know which ones are going to be that, right? So if we're going to do five freaking episodes in the pods, I'm just like, no, no, you've lost me. You've lost me here. So there was that. That was a weird thing. But yeah, we'll get into Emma and her many men. Okay. So we start with Steve, and I'm not sure, I'm 90% sure. I would need to go back and check this. But remember, we talked a couple of weeks back in the reality roundup about Love is Blind and how there were already reports that came out that there was a guy on Love is Blind who had essayed several women. I'm pretty sure it's Steve. Now, these sexual assaults happened after the show had filmed. So it really can't, have affected Netflix in that way, right? Like they couldn't have done anything as part of their background checks because these things all happened after. But we talked on the episode about like what they would do after the fact. Would they allow him to continue to be on the show? It seems that they did. But then it also seems like he wasn't on it for very long either. So I guess that's good. But yeah, their relationship was sort of weird. She was really into him. And then it got really awkward, I think, when she told him about her scars and about her surgeries. He tries to make her more comfortable when she brings it up by asking about her virginity. She said that she lost her virginity in college, and he's like, "Oh, you're a late bloomer like me." Then she ends up finding that offensive, and so the whole thing just kind of just goes south. She just gets the ick from him at this point, basically. He keeps going. He's like, "Have you seen The Notebook?" And she's like, "No, I've never seen it." And he's like, "Oh, well, every girl that I've ever dated has always wanted to see The Notebook with me." And she's like, "Okay, well, I beats my own drum." And you can literally feel her getting the ick. You can feel the tension with a knife, and it's just getting super thick. And so she tells him that like her comment or his comments have sort of rubbed her the wrong way, including him interrupting her and asking about her virginity, calling her a late bloomer. So he denies interrupting her, which is an interesting tactic. And he says that he feels he wasn't interrupting. He felt like he was painting a picture. And like the picture that he's painting is like of her reacting wrong, I guess. He feels like he reacted great to all of this. So I think that that's really an interesting take, right? I mean, like, listen, you can take your own perspective on who you feel is wrong here. A lot of people are already saying on the internet that they feel like she overreacted with Steve. I feel like once you've gotten the ick from somebody, you've gotten the ick, and then everything that they do was absolutely horrific, right? But she basically tells him at the end that she doesn't think that she can get there. I just think it's an interesting tactic when a girl tells you, "I don't like X and Y about you," to say, "No, I'm not," to those things, right? Like for him to say, "No, I didn't interrupt you. And the way that I reacted to you giving me this information about yourself, I feel like I reacted very well to that." Okay, good for you. Do you want an award, right? Like she's saying that she feels differently. She's feeling like you are interrupting her, and she's feeling like she didn't like your reaction to that, right? So you can at least acknowledge her feelings, acknowledge that you've made her feel a type of way and move on about it. But I just don't like the like denial of it all. It's just not cute. But that's basically all we see of him. Then she's really into this guy Connor, and it was a whole different experience. When she told him her story, he was super supportive, and he was like, "You know what, I think you're going to be an amazing mom because of what you've been through." Now he ends up breaking up with her because he has a stronger connection with Bree, and we'll get to that later. But she ends up being pretty heartbroken over that. She ends up telling Mike, who becomes her number one, that she broke things off with her number two and that she's heartbroken about that. I don't really like, and I never have, when we use the number ones and number twos in terms like that, because it does demean people if you think about it, right? To like trivialize someone down to a number, it really does end up affecting how you view the relationship in your mind, right? Like I was their number one, I was their number two. It fucks with you in a whole kind of way in your head. Like it makes sense to, right? So since this ends up being like an actual couple, let's have a little more information about them. So Emma is 27. She's a retail merchandising specialist, and Mike is 29. He is a sales manager. She's been single for a year, and he wants kids, but she isn't sure. So this ends up being like their main thing. And something that I find really interesting about him is that he finds the best tactic to deal with this situation is to try to force her to change her mind about it. It's sort of weird. And he's open about that during the series of episodes that he's doing this. He's like, I feel like I'm just going to keep trying to convince you until you change your mind. Now, for her, she feels like with being adopted, she's not sure of her own medical history. She doesn't know who her real parents are. Sorry, I don't want to say real parents. Sorry, her birth parents. And so, because of that, she just doesn't have that medical history and background about herself. And therefore, she feels nervous about having children because of that. And he ends up being really, assuring with her about that. He explains that he will always be there for her, that she'll be an amazing mom. He also has like a very sad story about his upbringing where he was a preemie and had trouble breathing and he actually flatlined and they had to bring him back to life. So he sees it as them both being fighters. And because of that, they'd be like these really great parents. Now, they do end up getting engaged, but his biggest concern is her saying that she doesn't want kids. And like, not that she hasn't officially said that yet. She said like she's not sure, but this is going to be an issue, right? Because she's not sure. And if she ends up changing her mind to like absolutely no, then this couple is dead in the water, right? And I feel like I completely understand the point that she's at where she's not quite sure. Sometimes it depends on the person or the circumstance. But because they haven't reached common ground in that regard, it's like I almost see this as like a horror movie waiting to happen in a sense, right? Because I already see this going south. I feel like when you get married, listen, people change, right? Their ideas on these things change. I've had friends who have both wanted kids going into a marriage, and then one person changes their mind and that changes things. Or they go into a marriage saying they both don't want kids and someone changes their mind, right? Like people can change their minds. That happens all the time. I just worry about a couple that goes into something where they're sort of on different pages. For Mike, he feels like it's good enough for me that she's open to it, but at the same time, it is a deal breaker for him, right? So he probably should have picked someone that was also 100% sure. And I don't like him sort of trying to force it on her. But anyways, they get engaged. At the reveal, he doesn't make any eye contact with her scars. So I couldn't really tell if he had a problem with them or not. These reveals are so weird. I'm never really good at being able to tell if they're attracted to the person or not. But, she's happy with his looks. He says he's happy with her looks. But he seems to be more affected, maybe is the word I'll use, by the fact that he has never dated someone from another race before. And so when he sees her for the first time, he sees that she's Asian. And these are his exact words. He says, "To fall in love with someone from a different race is really amazing in my eyes." Is it amazing? Isn't it just human nature in life, right? So it just worries me a bit. Not because he's not open to it, because he says that he is, but it just shows how much he lacks culture in that sense. Do you know what I mean? Like, it just sort of feels like when he's like, wouldn't it be amazing to fall in love with someone from a different race? Can you imagine? And it's like, yeah, I can imagine, right, Mike? So I'm just a little bit worried about where that's going to go and him possibly even just being offensive later on, quite frankly. So on the honeymoon in Mexico, she expresses that she has these fears that he's not really attracted to her physically or emotionally, and she just wants to make sure that they're on the same page. And he actually directly says to her straight up that he is. He confirms all of those fears for her. So that's really nice to have because, quite frankly, on these types of shows, I think it's natural for someone to want that kind of validation in this very weird experiment, right? Because it is an experiment. That being said, you can understand why the other party that you want validation from is probably having their own sort of freak out, right? So remember like Madison and Joe, for example, where he just sort of wanted to hear her say like, this is crazy, right? Like this entire thing is insane. I just need to hear you say that you're freaking out too. And because she couldn't do that, he sort of felt like he couldn't connect with her on that basis. And, so it's just really interesting to see. Okay, let's get into some other people who don't make it. but I feel are sort of relevant to talk about because they took up a lot of episodes during the first 1 to 6. So there's Kevin and Tyler and Kevin and Kaya. Okay. So first we'll talk about Kevin and Tyler. And these are basically the two women that he's into for the duration of his time on the show. With Tyler, they both want kids. And, she thinks she's being called to be a mother. It's what she's meant to do. She says that she loves her job, but marriage would be her priority. So she's definitely all into this experiment. Now, she asks if her kid's sexuality would ever be an issue for him. And I was like a little bit scared to hear the answer to this because, like, my God, after they answered this on the last season, whichever that was, Minnesota or what was the last season? I don't remember where they were set, but like, my God, the answers from those people were like horrific, right? Denver. Sorry, it was Denver. So he's like, no, that would be an issue for me. So it was a nice refresh from what we've seen last season. Now Kevin tells us that his mom had a blood infection that was affecting her leg and she had to have her foot amputated. So it really just made him have to grow up a lot quicker when he was young. He sort of became the man of the house. And these two just really get each other. So he tells her he gravitated towards her initially, but when it comes to Kaya, like, he relates to her too because her mother battled addiction, her dad passed away, her grandmother raised her, and like he just sort of connects with her in that familial sense. So he sort of flips a switch to Kaya after he has like this really long conversation with her. And he tries to kind of talk to Tyler about that, or I guess sort of tries to explain that he's had a serious other connection here where they've exchanged gifts and quite a lot has happened and there's been a strong connection. And then she just kind of like freaks out over that. She's like, I'm leaving. I can't believe this. You're not ready for this. So she tries to take off. And the producer tells her, like, well, isn't this what you normally do in relationships? You like pick up and leave. And she's like, yes. So they're like, okay, like, why don't you try to come back in? He isn't breaking up with you. He's just sort of trying to sort out his feelings. Now, in that moment, I personally wasn't quite sure. I thought he was breaking up with her, but it turns out he wasn't, right? He was just sort of, I guess, working that out with her in real time, which again, I understand why that can be so triggering. And I'm sure because of her past experiences, she was just really put off and thrown off by it because she was just like, okay, again, like a man is choosing someone else over me and I can't stand this. So it makes a lot of sense. He apologizes for upsetting her, but like at first I was surprised that she came back in and she ends up being a part of it. But then in episode 4, she ends up forcing him basically to make a decision. She's like, gives him the Katie Maloney ultimatum. She's like, by end of day, you need to decide between me and this other girl. And so he gives into the ultimatum and he makes things official with her, meaning they are like boyfriend and girlfriend. But then later in the day, they get in a fight with how far he's gone with her. And, he admits he has like these two amazing people. It's really hard. And then he feels dumb because he asked her to be his girlfriend. But, he says, like, I'm picking you, though. And she ends up standing him up later on a date because she just feels like, okay, he is not ready to propose. She just feels like this is a man who's on a journey and that this is not my husband. And it's like, okay, I mean, like, good for you, girl, to really recognize that. I guess she just really truly felt that the fact that he had gone so far with somebody else, she couldn't shake it, right? And sometimes we see that happening. We all know the concept of the show, we all know the idea, but regardless, it's a hard concept for a lot of people that you could have feelings for two people at the same time, especially after he's been like, okay, you're my girlfriend, right? To say, like, it's us, for him to carry on in a relationship with somebody else in any regard, she's just like, absolutely not, which makes complete sense. So in typical Love is Blind fashion, now that Tyler is gone, Kevin is like, okay, well, now I love Kaya, right? I love her. And like, that makes a lot of sense. Sorry, he didn't say I love her, but he was basically like, yeah, that's who I always wanted this whole time, right? So he flips his switch, he goes to her and he lays it on real thick. And he like almost proposes, but he's like, I need to take accountability. I need to tell you that Tyler and I had a little bit of a huge fight yesterday. She left and she is going to give you the impression that you were my second choice and she was my first, but that was never the case. And Kay is like, no, I never thought that you were, or that I was your second choice, but thanks for sharing that now. And she even sort of accuses him of like not really being like ready to come here. And she's like, listen, like, I just don't think I'm going to get there with you. I'm not in love with you. I'm not going to get there. But I don't know. She tries to have a moment here, in my opinion. Okay. At first, I sort of was starting to like it. She was standing up for herself and saying, like, I know what I want. I want to stand 10 toes down, that I deserve better. But then she kind of comes for him a little bit when she's like, you quite frankly shouldn't have even been here. You're basically not ready for this. And I feel like I don't even have like enough time here to really have processed that or whether he was ready or not. But I just sort of got defensive of it, like in his defense, even though I normally hate men, you guys, we know that. And I'm not even saying that I necessarily like him, but she was really trying to make him feel like dumb and stupid. And I didn't like that, right? I guess I'm always like kind of rooting for the underdog, but like I felt like it was a little much. I just felt like it was a little too much. And then when she ends up saying, like, get your shit together and all of this stuff, I just felt like it was really harsh for the level of where we were. Now, of course, again, I don't remember how many days this is, but again, it's probably been like 10 or 6 or not that many. So I just felt like the whole song and dance that she gave him, which while quite empowering as a woman, I also felt like this whole like I'm choosing myself thing, yelling it to him, yelling it to the ladies, like I choose myself. It felt very performative. It felt very like, this is what I plan to do if this doesn't work out with a guy. It felt produced, but not in a way where I don't think producers would ever recommend this because it was so cheesy. I think that she planned this herself, and like self-production never works, right? I really didn't like it. Like this was the first time, and there's somebody else, we'll talk about them later, who I felt like was very produced as well. And I'm like, I've never seen that on this show. That's just not something that I have felt. I have felt this to be like pretty genuine going forward. So, or in the past. So I was just really shocked to sort of see this again. Love women, love female empowerment. I just don't love when it's so constructed and contrived in the way where you're like, I choose me, I choose myself, la la la. It was giving fake, and I really didn't like it. Okay, let's go back to a couple that actually makes it. Okay, so we have Jordan 33, who is in software sales, and Amber 33, who is a nurse practitioner. Like Jordan, so he's maybe I don't normally like to talk about people's looks, so we're not really going to do that here. But when I talk about more conventional looking people, I would definitely say Jordan, right? I would say he doesn't have like a model body type. Let's say he's more of an average bodied looking American male. Now he's a foodie, he loves to cook. And Amber, she's quirky. There's something interesting about this woman. So I don't know, her hair, again, I hate talking about people's looks. She has a lot of volume in her hair. Like she definitely got that blonde. It's almost like a long blonde Karen Bob in a way. Like her hair is quite long, but if it was short, she would look like a Karen. Does that make sense? I can't really describe her. There's just something very old-fashioned looking about her. Now she has a 7-year-old daughter, Emma, who she brings up right away. And like props to her, right? Because, she says that she was judged a lot for it because she wasn't even with the guy. And she even uses for herself very old-fashioned terms like out of wedlock, which is not a really terminology we use anymore. But it just shows that there was a level of shame that came with it. And we've had single parents on the show before, but they've debated telling the person that they're bonding with or they're building a connection with much later in the process. Some choose at different times, right? And I just really had a lot of respect for her for bringing it up from the jump, because to her, it's not, baggage. To her, it's like her entire life, right? Emma is her entire life. So she just sort of felt like it was something she should bring up from the beginning. Now, I think that this ends up being so interesting because Jordan says that when he did the sign up for Love is Blind, this was his deal breaker. He did not want someone with kids. Now that he's hanging out with her and talking to her about her kid and hearing how cool her kid is, he's super into it. So I think that's kind of amazing, right? Like, you could think like, oh, but you said that's not what you wanted, right? But like, we all change our minds, like we're always saying. And like, maybe like he'll be a great stepdad. Maybe he would really love to have this kid in his life. And I love, again, that she brought it up for the jump so that he was able to sort of like learn and grow in his knowledge about her daughter throughout their interactions together. Yeah, I absolutely love that. And when he tells the guys about it and that he's a little bit worried about it, the guys even hype him up so much. They're like, dude, you're such a good guy. You're going to be so great at this. So I do really love that. He said that he has an insecurity about being stupid because he was told that by like women, and he had a teacher that said that. So it felt really good for him when he got his degree. Yeah, good for him. And you know what? It's funny that he mentions that. Not funny, haha, but funny in a sense where I was sort of beaten down at work for the past year in terms of thinking that, I don't know, they basically made me feel like I was bad at my job. And it kind of messes with you. And that's what I talked about in therapy today with my therapist. I was just like, it was so off-putting because I'm used to being like a good worker, right? And so now I question, am I smart? Am I stupid? Like, am I capable of working? And so it can really do that to you when you have people coming at you with like negativity about you and calling you dumb. You can start to feel dumb, right? So good for him for getting his degree. Now, he isn't sure what he wants to do with his life still. I think that's okay. I mean, he's 33. I know that seems like old, not old, but like old enough to know what you want to do. But like, come on, there are so many people still trying to figure out what they want to do into their 40s and 50s. I'm seeing all of this stuff on LinkedIn about people finding their real passions when they're older, building their first business at 50, starting a whole new career at 40. It happens all of the time. And I think it's totally okay, right? If it takes you a little longer to figure out what it is you want to do in life, I am like super supportive of that, as long as you're working towards it. Um, he is a little bit insecure about his weight. So I think that threw him off for a sec in terms of just worrying about whether they're going to have a physical connection. And she makes this like one little comment where I don't know. I think she's just being cheeky and silly, where she's like, well, as long as you're not like old and fat and ugly. And I think that just sort of like took him aback for a second because he just had like that fear or that insecurity for like one quick second. But, you know, he gets over that. He ends up baking her cookies at one point, and that was like really, really sweet, brings them like so that their side can have them. I absolutely love that. And then he ends up writing her this beautiful letter and proposes. So they get engaged, and at the reveal, they both seem attracted to each other, which is always great. Now we'll just go over to the honeymoon because at this point, let's just like break up the couple. So I'll just tell you what happens with them on the honeymoon. And this is basically it. They're attracted to each other, all is going well. And it's really to the point where they get like really, you know, there's that level of when you first start dating someone where you want to look like prim and proper and perfect, right? And definitely once you get into that married stage, you're not looking like that anymore. But these guys are sort of in the both stage, right? And I love that they are just jumping the hell in where she is shaving his back on the honeymoon and she is just wearing self tanner all brown before having to wash it all off while she's doing this. This just shows that they are getting right into marriage mode. I bet they're even going to the bathroom in front of each other. Okay. So, like, they're taking it seriously enough in a sense that they're not being all like, let's tiptoe around each other. They're like, no, here's who I am. Here's who you are. Let's shave each other's bodies. Okay. I'm here for it. Okay, now earlier when we talked about, the Allie and Anton of it all, where you have like a couple that you barely get to know, they're together and engaged within the beginning to the end of the very first episode. This was Victor and Christine for us, okay? Victor is 33. He's a professor of public policy, and Christine is 30. She's a speech pathologist. Victor is originally, and we're calling him Vic for the rest of it for argument's sake. He's originally from New York, and he is here to find a wife. She is Christian. She had a dad who was an addict and a mom who had mental health issues and needs therapy, but still won't get them. Had this history even where her dad drove her while he was intoxicated in the car. She talks about how she's not sure she's ever able to forgive him for that. Now, it's interesting to hear Vic's very similar version of a story where in his lifetime, he had a stepfather who would hang around their family. One night he heard really horrible yelling, so he went to help his mom, and he just saw like his mom's door open where he saw his mom's head and then he saw like a hand grab her back. He wasn't sure what to do. He was just a child, right? He ran over to his sister, who ends up like basically like running the guy out of the house, right? But like, you know, he feels this is so interesting. He feels like he is able to forgive that man. And that's a whole level of faith. And I feel like that's what these two have. They are both like very Christian. They end up praying to each other. She wants like the kids, the Super Bowl family, wants to be cooking for everyone. he wants like the wife, the family, the whole thing too. They just seem like that very like boring Christian couple in a good way, right? Like we usually have that one couple on the show where we either don't get to know them that well or we're not really that interested to get to know them because they're just like that quintessential boring, easy couple. And I think these might just make it, right? So he proposes in the first episode. They seem attracted to each other right away. And then on the honeymoon, they end up going to Malibu, California, while everyone else goes to Mexico. Now, they don't explain this to us whatsoever during the series of 6 episodes, and I have absolutely no idea why. Now, my mind just goes through that flashback of last season to Denver with Patrick and what was her face? What was that girl's name? Patrick and I don't remember her name. That girl we ended up hating because she basically just left him there at the airport. But she was like, I don't want to go to Mexico. I don't want to go to Baja. And he was like, okay, is it just the concept of going to Mexico? Like, you don't want to go to Mexico, but do you still love me? And do you still want to be together? And she was like, yeah, no, yeah, no. And so I'm like, why did they go to Malibu, right? Like, did one of the two of these people not feel like they wanted to go all the way to Mexico because they weren't sure about their relationship? Did they not want to be fully filmed? Because we did get snippets of them and it was just showing them like having fun and doing things in California and hanging out. But we got no explanation of this. So it's like, Netflix, if you're listening, why didn't Victor and Christine go to Mexico with the rest of the cast and the rest of the couples? Like, you can't leave us hanging like this. Why Malibu, California specifically? So, very curious about this. I'm sure we'll hear why at the reunion. But yeah, this is sort of leaving me hanging a little bit. But that's all we get on them. Our next couple is Brittany and Devonte. So Brittany is a nurse, and she was so into this idea coming into Love is Blind that she already bought herself a wedding dress. It was on sale, so she just felt like I might as well do it. But like me personally, that would be like a curse. I swear, I'm so partial to like jinxes and things like that that I would just be too worried. Like I would be ruining the whole thing by like buying myself a dress, but I could be wrong. We all have our I'll do things our own way, right? Now, the great thing about both of these people is that they're excited to be parents. He's established in his career and he knows himself really well, which is nice, right? You rarely find that in a guy. It's hard to find a man who's just like, I know who I am and I know what I want. And usually by the time they get there, it's just like, we are so, we've moved on. So it's really nice to hear that. Now, he does end up letting Brittany know, like at some point during this production period, at some point during episodes 1 to 6, that production pulled them aside to let him know that his grandfather died. So he doesn't decide to leave the show. He decides to stay, and Brittany promises him that like if he's needing anything from her, that she's there for him. Emotionally, physically, whatever. So he decides to stay for the show, but that's why he says it's important for him that he's here for the right reasons. So he explains that his dad died when he was 42, but his dad wasn't really in his life since the time that he was 3. He got the chance to meet him once, but, it didn't really pan out. And for him, he just really couldn't understand how you could have a child and not want to be in their life. So for him, he feels like that father-son bond, that bond you have with your child, having a child in general, that's like really important for him. So they end up getting engaged, and they did keep their looks a secret. Before they do the whole reveal, she says this one little thing where she's like, we kept it a secret. I'm Latina. I'm nervous. And I'm like, is she saying that she's nervous because she's Latina? And I'm like, I hope not. Like, you think like that's ridiculous, but we all have our own insecurities, right? Like sometimes I'm really insecure about how I look, where I'll be like, okay, if I don't hear from a guy again after a date, I assume it's because I was too overweight for him. And it could be like anything, but it's always for me, I'm always assuming it's my weight. And for her, like, I know it could be crazy, but it could be her experience where guys have not been into her because she's Latina. And so maybe she's really worried about that, which is, the concept of the show, right? Like love is blind, but is it? No. So, and that's something that makes her nervous. But when they end up getting to see each other, she's the one who ends up saying like, oh, he's shorter than I thought he was. And like, we all get fat anyway. And I'm like, oh, that's not a good thing to say. Like, I don't think he's fat. Like he was more so like stocky. Like, and he has like a very square head. Like he's an interesting looking fellow. She does say that he's not the kind of person she would have ever like stopped or approached when out and about. And then you have him saying that he's never dated a person of color, so he was surprised about that. But they do seem attracted to each other, but I'm always such a bad gauge at this. I'm always bad at being able to tell if people are able to fake this correctly. Actually, I just had like a crazy idea. Do you guys think that at home, before they get on the plane to come do this show, they practice their like non-surprised face for like the idea of seeing someone? Because you don't want to come off shocked. You don't want to come off like you're not attracted to the person, right? So I wonder if they practice like a very stoic or a very happy face to do no matter what the person looks like. I would, right? I wouldn't want to embarrass myself or the other person on TV by like making a weird face like, eh. I would hope that I wouldn't. I would hope that I would keep the straightest face possible or be smiling as much as possible. But I feel like there might be something innately within you or within your eyes. I feel like the eyes are the window to the soul, and they can always tell what you're really thinking and saying, right? So at the resort, it just sort of starts to go haywire. So they're on the honeymoon. I always call it a honeymoon. Is it the honeymoon? I guess it's the pre-honeymoon, right? It's the pre-vacation before they actually live together, move in together, and then before like the final, do we want to get married? So they're at the resort and she's already noticing a disconnect. Like she feels like she's spending the mornings alone. She only gets a kiss when she goes in for a kiss. So I'm actually really proud of her for calling him out on feeling disconnected, right? She just says something right away because, like, guys, I've always said this, communication is so important in a relationship, in any kind of relationship, even a friendship. And so the fact that she's bringing this up right away, like, good for her. There's only like 4 weeks in this whole thing, and you might as well like figure out if it's going to work or not and figure out if you have the same communication styles and if you can even like fix it and get there. So he's like, no, like, there's nothing wrong. Like, I just sort of need to like be in nothing and sit in nothingness, right? And now I've definitely dated people like that too. But to this day, I'm still not sure if that was them really disconnecting from me or that was something that they just always did, because it did always feel lonely when I'd be sitting in the same room with the person that I'm with and they would act as if I'm not even there. And that's what basically she's getting, right? Now she ends up telling him and somebody else on the cast. I couldn't really see who she was talking to, but let's just say one of the other girls. She ends up telling him and one of the other girls that she told him that, like, look, we can have sex if you want, because I feel like there's this disconnect physically and emotionally. And if you feel like that's what can connect us, I'm happy to do it. Let's go for it. And so, it's kind of sad to me already because it's not necessarily you're not necessarily getting the sense from her that she wants to have sex with him. Like, she hasn't actually said, like, this is something I'm ready for. This is something I feel like I want to do because we are connected. It's almost like this act of desperation in a sense where she's offering it is almost like can we try this or can we try that? And it's like, honey, it's sex, right? Like, it's serious. And it's like, of course they're going to do it at some point anyways. They're married. But if you're not ready yet, you're not ready. And I feel sad for her that she's sort of doing everything that she feels that she's capable of doing to try to make this work and to make him happy, right? Which is a sweet thing, but she's feeling lonely. And she's confused because she feels like, okay, day one on this trip, we made out hardcore. So then she sort of asks, like, are they not having sex or are they not making out? Yeah, that's what she's asking. She asks him, okay, are we not making out more? Are you not kissing me because you're afraid of getting aroused? And we haven't had sex yet. And that's why she sort of brings up the idea of like, okay, maybe let's just have sex. But I don't love that she said that on TV either, because he's not going to love that. Again, not that I'm ever protecting men, but when we're talking about like the intricacies of like the sexual stuff, it gets kind of like irky, because like when she's saying like, oh, do you not want to like basically come because I you may not feel like I'm ready to have sex yet, but just so you know, I am. This whole thing is just kind of, I don't know, weird to me. So she tries again to engage with him in these conversations. And she's just like, I just feel like I need more from this. And she tells him in bed, like, you're not engaging with me physically. It's sort of like, I feel like you're not even acknowledging me. And he's like, okay, sorry, I like to get up before you. You like to lay around in bed. So I'm off like already doing something. And then he's also like, sometimes I'm just falling asleep on the couch. So you're taking something as a personal attack that's just like, me just being me, right? And he's like, I don't need to be touching you all the time to prove to you that I love you. Now, as soon as he said this, it made me think for a second. It made me realize, okay, these two have very different love languages. Because for him to say, for you to think I need you to be touching all the time for us to be like in love, maybe that is what she needs. Maybe that is her love language. Maybe her love language is physical touch. So for you, Devonte, you may feel like, okay, that's not what I need to show you that. But I think he needs to be open to the fact that that might be something that she needs, right? I think for her, well, like I said earlier, right? Like it's hard in this whole experiment because you feel like you need a level of validation from the other person, but at the same time, the other person is also trying to figure it out for themselves. That being said, Devonte is not being super receptive to her feelings, right? I'm again really proud of her that she is being super open and being like, hey, these are the ways in which I feel like you are not giving me what I need. And she's doing it like upfront and like super early. But he's not being like, I see you, I feel you, I hear you. Instead, he's being like, no, you're wrong, right? Which again, just doesn't work in a relationship because if that's how you're making her feel, that's how you're making her feel. That may not be your intent. And that is what he's saying here. He's like, if I'm like not in the room with you, it's not a personal attack. It's for these reasons. But I just don't think that we need to be like touching all the time. Now she feels like, I feel like I'm walking alone in spaces that you're in, right? So I feel like the fact that they just are not connecting on that level, like physically and emotionally already, really says something. Again, I love her for being able to be so open and honest about this with him, especially so early on. But I guess the fact that he's not receptive to it, it's just going to make things difficult. Like I don't know. And then he tries to pull the whole like family card. He's like, like my grandfather died, so like I'm dealing with that. So think about the fact that I'm dealing with like other things on my mind, and it's like. I hate to ever say that someone's like pulling a card when somebody dies, but it sort of feels like he's doing that because again, why can't you just say to her, like, I see you, I feel you, I hear you, I'll try to change a little bit, I'll try to give you more of what you need. Instead, he's just sort of getting defensive and saying, well, you shouldn't be making me feel that at a time when I'm going through X, Y, and Z. And when people do that, it tries to like essentially shut down what that person was communicating. You have someone in the relationship communicating, hey, these are the ways I don't feel fulfilled in this relationship. And when you pull a card that says, like, well, my mental health, or well, this person died, or well, such and such is happening, it sort of shuts down the other person from what they were saying about their feelings because now what you're going through is more important, right? So it's not a good way to start, quite frankly, in a relationship because, again, she's being so open and honest and real about what she needs, and he's just really shutting that down. So don't know where that's going to go, but it's not great. Okay, let's move on to our next couple, Alex and Ashley. And this is one of our more like conventionally attractive couples. He's like tall, dark, and handsome. She's like tall, skinny, leggy, blondes, long blonde hair. Alex is 30. He's a soccer coach. Ashley is 33, and she is a claims supervisor. So basically, Alex mentions from the jump that, he won't really approach women unless he is physically attracted to them. Sorry. So he knows that this is a fault of his, and that's basically why he came on this show. He talks about how hard it is to be emotional as a man, but it is a lot easier for him to do with Ashley. So I appreciate him bringing that up at all because, it is sort of still weird, even in 2026, for men to be open about their emotions. But emotions are so important in a relationship. So even though he's giving off the like typical male vibes, I appreciate him talking about being open to being emotional. So as I mentioned, he is a soccer coach, but that was because he used to play soccer. He ended up having 4 knee surgeries, so he had to stop playing. And he talks about the mental anguish of not getting to do what you worked your whole life to do and how hard that is. And this really made me think about like a lot of stories I heard about when I was young in sports, basically. I remember hearing this story about this hockey player, this young guy who had worked his whole life to become a hockey player. And then he got injured and he couldn't play anymore. And he ended up, trigger warning, taking his own life. And you would think, like, how crazy is it of someone to do something like that when they're so young and accomplished and capable and have really their whole life ahead of them? But when they have been training their whole lives to do this one thing and have sort of that one track mind about doing this one thing their entire lives, and that's taken away from them, they sort of think, like, I don't even know what to do with myself, right? And that's just such a scary thought that they just can't even imagine life without that thing, right? So when he talked about that and he acknowledged that, I thought that that was really interesting. So they end up getting engaged. He proposes. And when they see each other, they seem attracted to each other. Like I said, they're both conventionally attractive. Now, when they're on the honeymoon in Mexico, this is where I see sort of the startings of a really controlling guy. Now, you kind of have to watch this a couple of times to gauge what's going on here. And I'm still not really sure, right? Like I'm watching somebody else's relationship and you're watching like these small little quips of things, but like this is what I picked up. This is what I'm picking up that he's putting down. So they're talking about reading basically, and he's basically talking about how well read he is. And she makes this little joke like, "Oh, are you reading Cliff Notes?" And he's like, "No, I'm reading for real," essentially. So then she just sort of like makes eyes at him for a second, just gives him sort of a look. And he gets basically like really controlling for there. He's basically like, "Don't do that." And she's like, "Do what?" Right. And then he accuses her of rolling her eyes and says, again, "Don't do that. Don't roll your eyes." And she's like, I haven't done anything. Then he calls her dangerous. Again, all she's done so far is look at him. They are now just both sitting there and looking at each other. Then she bites her lip and he says, "Don't bite your lip like that." And then he says, "You know what you're doing to me." And it just gets like this really weird energy where he's implying that there's like this whole game of like cat and mouse that she's playing with him with her eyes, right? And I'm not really seeing it, but she's also not really seeing it either. So again, maybe I'm playing into this whole thing in a weird way that nobody else is seeing this because I haven't listened to anybody else's podcast on this yet and haven't talked to anybody else about these episodes. But the way that I was reading it was this guy is really just trying to control her in ways to just make himself feel more powerful in a conversation. But at the same time, it really didn't seem like she was picking it up that way. Then she turns the whole thing around by making it sexual, changing the subject, and she doesn't seem put off by the encounter at all. But I don't know. You guys tell me what you think. I just thought it was really weird. Now, she also describes herself as a very sexual person, but a very loyal person. She thinks that sex is very important in a relationship. So, basically that they're going to do it early on. And she says that she knows what she wants and she knows what she likes. And, she thinks that she's very attracted to him. So I think, for her, they're in a really good place. But they go on this boat date when they're in Mexico and she's trying to, I guess, like kind of gather more information from him in terms of like his fears or just what he sort of thinks about the relationship. And she's noticing that she's not really getting much. When they get back to the hotel, she's like, "Well, are you like nervous about moving in together? Are you nervous about going home?" He's like, "No, no nerves, nothing at all." And then he's like, "Well, that kind of makes me nervous, right?" Now, something interesting happens where he does say early on to something to the effect of like, she's not his normal type. He normally likes like dark skin, darker hair, or whatever. But I honestly put it out of my mind because, again, to me, she was so conventionally beautiful, Ashley, I mean, that I just figured he'd be attracted to her anyways. But then we see him having a sit down with Brittany of Devontae and Brittany, okay? He like pulls her aside on vacation. So somebody else's wife or fiance, right? And he's like, "Look, I normally like women with darker hair, darker features, like you, Brittany. And, I'm comfortable saying that. And I'm comfortable saying that I am here to just sort of try this out to see if the physical matches the emotional. And I'm still exploring, and I'm perfectly comfortable saying I'm still exploring." And Brittany's like, "Okay, have you expressed that to Ashley, that you're still exploring and that you are not normally attracted to someone that looks like her?" And he's like, "Yeah, I mean, it's like a tough conversation to say you're not my usual type." But it's like, have you said it? Because I don't think I really necessarily saw him say that to her. Again, I could be wrong. Then he says, this isn't foreshadowing, but he would feel fully comfortable saying that, he's not attracted to her and that she's not his type. And then he asked Brittany if she's in the same boat and if she would basically like ditch her guy for the same reason, because Devontae is not the kind of guy that she would go for. Now, I don't know if you guys sort of picked it up the same way that I did, but to me, it seemed like Brittany was at first like taken aback by him saying that. First, because she hasn't really described to him what her type would be, anyways. It could be Devontae, but then she's like, it's not, right? I'm normally into a guy that is a little bit taller and he's smaller than I'm like normally into. But I don't know. Like, Alex was giving me the vibe that he was trying to pull Brittany aside to basically say to her, like, if you ditch yours, I'll ditch mine and we should get together. And would you actually be down for that? Almost to the effect of where he wanted to like make sure that she would be into it so he wouldn't end up being alone. And I find this just so baffling for so many reasons. One, it's so disrespectful. She's with another guy. Two, disrespectful to your fiance who you are there with. And three, again, Ashley is so conventionally attractive. And now we can't help who we're attracted to, right? But I just find it so baffling that somebody as beautiful as Ashley is sort of being treated like this by Alex, to the effect of he might not be able to get there physically, which to me just seems crazy because she is so beautiful, right? So I just feel really sad for her that someone as beautiful as her is having to undergo someone sort of talking about having to get there physically with her and that he may not be able to. Basically, the segment with Ashley and Alex ends with her just trying to get more out of him in terms of like his fears and what he's thinking about their future, and him just being like, fears, no, I don't really know, and just rambling on about like other things until she just sort of gets bored and gives up, and she's like, all right, I don't even know if this guy likes me. Don't know about these two. I don't really see them making it if he's already kind of basically decided that he's not attracted to her. Okay, two more couples left. We've got Connor, 31. He's an account manager, and Bree Breezy, okay, our Sparkle Megan, because she's calling herself Breezy. She's 33 and she is in product development. So she has a really big, like, bubbly personality. And this is the second person who, unfortunately, I think is being sort of, a producer plant, or just really trying to play it up for either trying to make a name for herself or something, or to create a storyline for herself. But you'll definitely see this later on in the episodes with her. Now, at first, I'm like, okay, I love someone who's an extrovert. I love an extroverted queen. So she talks about being in competitive cheerleading growing up and in softball. Connor talks about wanting his partner in crime. Now, initially, Bree had a connection with Chris, who wanted to like help challenge her in what she wanted to do, and they had a good banter. But he also liked Jess, and that's what we're going to get into later. He wasn't sure about Jess because she's 6 years older. Bree is younger. He doesn't normally factor in age, but they both end up telling each other that they want to focus on their other connections. So Connor is with Bree, Chris is with Jessica. We'll get to them later. So right now we're still on Connor and Bree. So these two are really into each other. On the honeymoon, they're both really attracted to each other. So we don't really see that being like one of their major issues. But the main issue with Bree is that I guess she's sort of like a chaos monster in a sense. And she just needs there to be drama, because when we're at the mixer, she is sort of put off by the fact that when everybody meets, it's sort of the first mixer when they're on the honeymoon, everyone's on the beach, we're all meeting for the first time. She can't believe that nobody's like, oh my God, you're so-and-so. I can't believe you actually look like this, or that there were no deep conversations between any of the people who had connections previously. There just wasn't, right? And again, for me personally, as the watcher, I didn't feel I needed that, because I guess maybe I'm right that there wasn't enough going on with the couples that there would be enough stuff to talk about. So when I'm sitting here saying I'm not that invested in these people, maybe they weren't as invested with each other either, in a sense, if you think about it, right? Because if I'm sitting here saying like, no, there's nothing I need wrapped up, right? There's no other relationships I need more information on, then I guess none of them needed it either. And okay, nothing to wrap up, nothing to wrap up. But then when she goes to bed with Connor that night, she's just like, I'm upset about it, right? Like, why did nobody get sort of like up in arms about how somebody truly treated them in the pods, or like how was nobody shocked about how somebody else looked? Like, why were there no conversations about that? Like, I feel like we were all open and raw and real, and like, that's it, that's it. And he was sort of taken aback because I think he was realizing that she wants to create this unnecessary drama, and you can tell that he's just not into it by this blank look on his face. So she ends up bringing it up to him again later on after she has a conversation with Chris, who was one of her previous matches. She does sort of try to draw out like a conversation with him that she was having with Connor, where like, you know, we had this connection, we should have a conversation about it. And it went pretty normal. So when she brings it up to her fiance, Connor, again, to be like, it's just not what I expected. I expected like for someone to have had a previous connection with me to like want to have a conversation with me about it and to tell me how he felt about it and stuff. And for Connor, he was just like, yeah, I was just able to, cut off those relationships easy peasy lemon squeezy. So I don't really understand why you can't. And he's such a good guy in a sense in this moment, or that's sort of how I'm taking it, where he's like, I guess I had to tell myself that while that's not something that I would need, I was able to just sort of cut off these relationships. Maybe this is something that you need, and that's okay because we all need different things, and that's what you needed in this moment. Now, she ends up defending it by saying that her conversation with her number two, i.e., Chris, ended up being kind of fluffy because there was nothing to sort of iron out, and he's all happy now. And, she just sort of felt like we're supposed to compare our relationships. Now, is she wrong? No, right? I guess we are used to seeing that on Love is Blind. We're used to, even at the very least, it being very obvious that producers have asked them to rate their relationships out of 1 to 10, right? We've definitely seen them do that. So I think she's put off by that. But again, it's not your business. You're not the producer. You're not running the show. If they're not asking you to rate your relationship, don't worry about it. If they're not asking you to compare your sex lives, don't worry about it. If they're not asking you to like get on the ground and bark like a dog, don't do it, right? Just live your life, have the relationship. And I feel like she's ruining this potentially amazing relationship for herself by being so worried about the production of it all. And that's not a good thing. Okay, let's move on to our last couple, Chris and Jessica. Now, Chris, I was not able to get his exact age, but I think it's like 32. Jessica is 38, and she is an internal medicine doctor. He has a cat. She has 2 dogs. It'll be amazing. They are both open to kids, but are both okay without it. He was in Kuwait for a year and saw a lot of trauma in that regard. She worked in infectious diseases in the hospital during COVID and worked through the traumas of that. So they're both, sort of in tune in that regard, having dealt with and worked in traumatic fields. She's been divorced, and she explains that her idea of marriage and her ex's idea of marriage and what a spouse was supposed to do in a marriage were very different. She didn't really explain what she meant by that, but she did say that she has a very full, fun, active life, and she wants to share that with somebody. So to me, that means that maybe in her previous relationship, she wanted her ex to come with her to all of the things that she was into, and maybe he wasn't into doing that. That could have just been like one aspect of it, but that's just something that I'm thinking about. But I wish she had talked more about this because I bet it could have been really relevant to this relationship. I mean, that being said, obviously they can cut out so much of this of their conversations, and I'm sure they do, right? I mean, they're talking for hours and hours and hours, and we see such a small snippet. But I feel like someone who's been divorced, has the benefit of having gone through a marriage and knowing what they like and what they don't like. And I just would have liked to have heard more about what worked in her marriage and what didn't, and what she wanted to carry forward and what she didn't. I just would have appreciated the experience, maybe at the tell-all, right? So they end up getting engaged. And then in Mexico, the very first scene of them together is them sort of just like looking outside and cuddling, and it was this beautiful moment. But then she talks about how the news really gets to her and how she can sort of sometimes get really aggressive on Instagram with her strong political opinions. And I'm like, girl, Girl, you don't have to tell me. Hello, Dana on the internet lately, getting strong and aggressive with her little political opinions. That's me over here. So it was so funny because it was such a random thing to say, right? Like the news is really getting to me, and I get really aggressive on Instagram with my political opinions. Like, when have you heard someone say that on this show before? Like, never. So I thought that that was really funny because, reminds me a lot of me. He's super attracted to her. He's like in awe of her. He thinks she's the greatest thing since sliced bread. So that's really great. And she sort of had this internal feeling already, like before meeting him, that she was attracted to him, which is the idea, right? Like if you could feel attracted to someone and then when you meet them, be able to translate that feeling into actual love, then love is blind, right? It works for some people. I don't know. So, like I mentioned, they do have like this 6-year age difference, I think. But other than that, it hasn't really come up and it's not really an issue for them. So that's it, you guys. That's episodes 1 to 6. Those are all of our couples. Um, don't really care about most of them. I'm not excited about a lot of them. I still love breaking down the psychology of these people and their relationships, and I will definitely be continuing to cover this as always, and I'll be having a lot of fun guests on to join me to do so. So we'll obviously be back next week to talk it, but I don't know. Tell me what you guys think. I'm going to do another rewatch, but there was just something about it where I just couldn't feel as invested as I normally do. But that is the end of the episode for today, you guys. I hope that you enjoyed it. As I said, you can watch this episode on YouTube. Follow me on Instagram, TikTok, and Threads at The Bravo Investigator. Join the Facebook group. Subscribe to the Patreon at patreon.com/The Bravo Investigator Podcast. And I love you, BBs. I will see you next time. Thank you for listening to the Bravo Investigator Podcast. For more content, head over to patreon.com/The Bravo Investigator Podcast. Follow me on Instagram, TikTok, and Threads at The Bravo Investigator. If you enjoyed the show, leave a 5-star review. Love you, BBs. See you next time.